Stephanie Jenouvrier is with us tonight. Thank you for being here. You're also a research biologist with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, and you've been looking at the impacts of climate change on emperor penguins. Your newest study actually shows a grim outlook for the beautiful birds. What did you find?
So we found that emperor penguins are marching towards their extinction if greenhouse gases emission continue their current courses. Specifically, we found that 98% of the emperor colony around the coast of Antarctica are going to be quasi-extinct by the end of the century, and the global population of emperor penguin will be extinct by the end of the century as well under this high emission scenario.
All right, so what is the biggest issue that the birds are facing?
So the biggest issue is the loss of sea ice that is projected with climate warming, because emperor penguin life cycle is tied to sea ice. Emperor penguin depend sea ice for breeding, molting, and feeding. And for example, on my background picture here, you can see that the penguin are on sea ice, and they are the only species that breed on sea ice during the Antarctic winter.
Why are you studying such a specific bird, and why are they so significant?
There are a couple of reasons. First, I study seabird in Antarctica because in Antarctica, it's a relatively pristine environment compared to elsewhere in the world. And when you are studying climate change, it's very hard to distinguish the effect of climate warming to other threats like habitat degradation or exploitation of resources. So in Antarctica, those other threats are less important. So it's easier for us as scientists to study directly the impact of climate change. The other reason is that you really need long-term data set to be able to distinguish the impact of climate change to the impact of variability, both in the climate system and the ecosystem. So in Antarctica, we are lucky to have a continent that is devoted to peace and science. And so many long-term studies have been deployed over there. And our scientists have been studying emperor penguin for decades. And there is a particular location in East Antarctica called Point Geology, where the emperor penguin have been studied for like 70 years. We have time series of emperor penguin number of breeding pairs since the 1960s.
All right, and one of your goals actually is to get them on the endangered species list. How actually important is that designation?
So for me, listing the emperor penguin as a species that is threatened on the Endangered Species Act is very important, because even if they occur outside the US jurisdiction, some of the protection under the Endangered Species Act may apply. And for example, it confers some benefits such as promoting research and conservation action. And I think most importantly, listing will require all US federal agencies to evaluate and ensure that their activity do not jeopardize the species or their habitat, which could include limiting greenhouse gas emission. And I think this is also why it's very important, because it could raise awareness of climate impact. And my hope is that, it's very hard for us to understand what will be the impact of a few degrees warming. But if we start as scientists to document that there will strong, huge loss of biodiversity and some species will go extinct, such as the emperor penguin, I'm hoping that it will be a different way to raise awareness about the effect of climate change and stimulate climate action.
All right, and your work actually looked at various levels of warnings, and there were scenarios that do give us hope, correct?
Yes, this is the message that I like to convey, is that if we meet the Paris Agreement, we can halt the march to extinction of emperor penguin. Some viable refuges will exist in Antarctica. So we have the choice today, basically, to save penguin. But it's not only a story about penguin, it's a story about many species. Emperor penguin are just living indicators, because their life cycle is tied to sea ice, and they live in such delicate balance with their environment that they are indicator species, or the canary in the coal mine, if you if you wish, and so they are here alerting us of the potential effect of future climate change and those different pathways. So emperor penguin can indicate, the consequences of the different choice we are going to make today.
All right. And Stephanie, what's the biggest takeaway that you want for our viewers to know?
What I would like people to know is that, emperor penguin are marching to extinction if greenhouse gas continue their current course. And, when I observe penguin in Antarctica, they are amazing species because they have adapted to the harshest climate on Earth. And they do so through physiological and behavioral adaptation. But one of behavioral adaptation is that they huddle together to prevent themselves freezing to death and also to conserve heat and shelter from the intense wind. So when I observe penguin huddling in the harshest climate, I believe that we can learn a thing or two about their collective will. And I think that only together they can brave the harshest climate, and only together we can face a different climate future, and we can take action today to combat, climate change.
Stephanie, thank you so much.